Had a class, Humanities, Shasta College, Humanities 2. Time is flying when you're having fun. It's going to be 114 degrees tomorrow. Just thought I'd throw that out there for you. Just in case you're thinking, it's always hot in Reading, but 114 is a little extreme. Anyway, on that happy note, we got to continue this class like there is no more classes, and it's a runaway freight train. There's too much to cover. We only have another, essentially less than 2 weeks. I'm going to finish out this week with literature. And I'm in the 20th century now and 21st century. We're just moving straight ahead. And I'm going to sign this essay number 5 today, right now. So look for it in assignments. I'll assign some videos to watch, and you write an essay about them. What you see, what you saw, what you got from them. All the good stuff. Then we'll have one more essay, a final paper, and the quiz. Oh, that's all coming next week. It's going to be a full week. The research paper is going to be based on anything we've covered in this class since day 1, from Florence, Renaissance art, classical music, to new music. I know we haven't covered a lot of that because we don't have a lot of time. But I'm going to give you 3 or 4 subjects, and each of those classifications, you choose one, and you write a research paper. Now, it's going to be different than these essays. You'll do some research, and you'll have a works cited page, and I'm going to ask you right now, don't use Wikipedia. Try to think outside the box and go a little deeper in that. Maybe watch a documentary or some film excerpts of something on YouTube. It's up to you to do the research. It's worth, I think, 20 points. So it's worth a bit of mileage on your grade. Let's hope we can cram it all in. We'll see what happens. Anyway, today I want to continue with what we're doing, literature. Earlier this week, I was covering Harlem Renaissance writers. Hopefully you saw some of that stuff on the assignment, the videos. And I want to continue with writers because they're that important. And literature has shaped the universe we live in because it's helped explain the universe we live in, who we are, who we want to be, who we might dream about being. Do you read? And I'm not talking about school book or a message from one of your friends on your iPhone. I'm talking about serious reading, like a novel. Here's the novel I'm reading right now, The Flamethrowers. This woman, Rachel Kushner, is a relatively new writer, been around about 10 years. I guess you would call her possibly a feminist because she writes about women that are on the edge of desperation and freedom. And this is all about a conflicted girl who is trying to find her place in the world, go to New York City, maybe be a writer or a poet. I'm always looking for interesting reads. This is a fiction book, folks. It's a novel. When people say it's a novel, that means fiction. When it's not a novel, it's nonfiction. And that could cover biography or memoir or autobiography. That's not fiction, folks, and it's not called a novel. So just to give you a heads up, this is fiction. Now, does that mean it's not the truth? No, that means it's probably more truthful than real life. Novels provide a truth. Did it happen? Did this story happen? No, it's made up. But it's truth. It's truthful about human emotions, what people go through, what people do. 99% of the movies you watch are fiction, folks. The Matrix never happened. I'm sorry to tell you that. X-Men, sorry, never happened. And even when they do a film that is based on a true story, like say for example, Ma Rainey. What? No, I was going to say that. No. There was a new movie out just recently based on something that really happened. But the dialogue, the acting is all fictionalized. So don't get confused when people say it's based on a true story. Oh, then you think, oh, it's true then. There's truth. Doesn't mean it's true. It just means it's based on something that really happened. But if you really think about it, most things have happened. We've lived through wars and famine and good times, bad times, and we're all still living through that. So right now there's going to be quite a few books coming out about our pandemic. There's been other plagues, folks. I should read the book called The Plague by Kafka. Read that one. The plague's been around quite a while in various forms. Anyway, it's always a new plague, right? To make us panic. So anyway, literature is important. I've written a couple novels. Here's one. Just thought I'd throw it out there. That's me. The novel's called Untried, Rex Haas Thompson. And look, there it is. I'm on the back cover. It tells what the book's about, who I am, who the publisher is, and how you can go buy it. I wrote this 10 years ago. I'm writing a new one right now. And people were going, oh, people aren't reading as much. Yeah, but people are writing more than ever. You know why? Because there's a lot going on and a lot we can express. And all it takes is a pen and a piece of paper or your hands on the clicky keyboard. Nothing's preventing you from writing your story. I've taught creative writing over the years, and my students, a lot of them say, well, everything's been written about. Not true. There's 40 billion of us. That's 40 billion different voices. Your story hasn't been written. At least not your voice. There's a million ways to tell a story. How you tell your story that's where the creativity comes in. And that's where the transcendence comes in. And we're all trying to transcend the ordinary. Remember what Hamlet said, to be or not to be? We're all struggling with that existential question of why am I here? What is the purpose of my being? Well, maybe it's to write a great novel or a great play or write a movie or do a painting or write a symphony or write a 4-chord punk rock song or do a hip hop rap, do some slam poetry. There's a million ways to be creative, especially now when we got this, right? This is a movie studio, editing suite, recording studio. Who would have thought? It's right there at your fingertips. Only thing that's keeping you from doing it is inertia. And when it's 114, it's hard to be proactive. What do we want to do? Sit inside an air-conditioned building or float on a flotation device at the lake. Anyway, I'm getting off track. So the essay number 5, which I'll sign today, which will be due next week. I know you have another essay due tonight. That's it, folks. We do one essay a week, but next week is going to get a little bit more pushed. You could take it, though. Summer school is condensed. Normally, these classes go 17 weeks. Summer school goes 6. So it's supposed to be densely uh, constructed so you can get through an entire semester in 6 weeks. So today I want to talk about why reading matters. I'm going to post a TED Talk on YouTube in my usual place and on Canvas. And it's a lecture. It's a 15 minutes lecture on why reading matters. And then I'm going to show another clip about a great novelist, John Steinbeck, and it's a documentary. And then I'll show an excerpt. It's an audio excerpt from a wonderful American writer named Flannery O'Connor, who's died way too soon. One of the most influential writers in our history of writing. And it is a woman, by the way. And then I'm going to give you some choices on the essay you should write. So look for that stuff in Canvas and try to enjoy it. Don't think of it as torture. Here's what I keep repeating on the essays. What I'm looking for is you guys to actually listen or write or watch these videos and write your paper about what you see, what you got out of it, not just going to a Wikipedia site and giving me the facts and figures of somebody's life. I'm not sure if you learn much with that, besides taking text from a website and putting it into your paper. Okay, I think you know what I'm looking for. Hope you are. Make sure they're 3 pages or more. Anything under that, you lose points. No late assignments. You'll have plenty of time to do it. You have a week. Reading is a discipline. Serious reading is a discipline. Even lightweight reading. I'm like everybody else. I'm older than probably all of you, and I grew up reading. And I used to get books, the bigger the better, but now I go for smaller ones because I figure I could finish it. I'm like everybody else. My time is limited. I don't want to. I'm looking for profound experience in 200-300 pages, and then I'm out because I've got another book to read. I have a stack of book over my bed because I read every night, and it's usually mostly I read about movie directors and rock and roll people, especially from the punk rock era, and then I try to read a fiction book in between. And because I write fiction, this is how I get inspired. This woman has inspired me. I heard her on a NPR radio the other day. Intelligent, smart, articulate woman who wrote this book. Reading the female voice is different than the male voice. Some great male voices out there. Obviously, probably the biggest in the land: Ernest Hemingway, and John Steinbeck, Philip Roth, one of my favorite all-time writers. Very, very male voice. And then women kind of come under the wire. They didn't get their due as much. Maybe they're getting their due now. It's not easy to get your voice heard. We're all screaming into the wind. So because reading is a discipline, the more you do, the more you're able to do. Just like playing an instrument, you have to practice. And if you haven't practiced in a while or never, it's hard to pick it up. But it will, I'm not exaggerating, it will change your life. When you get through a wonderful book, whatever it is, of Mice and Men, of Flannery O'Connor's Wise Blood, or Hemingway's Farewell to Arms, or Toni Morrissette's Beloved. Colson Whitehead is an African-American writer who won the Pulitzer Prize for the underground. Once you get through their books, you'll learn something they never thought. The wisdom that comes through, because writers have the ability to put things into focus. They put things in context. They put things. They tell us about who we are. They're essentially holding the mirror up to who we are, and that's what a good writer will do. When I do the quiz, I'm going to ask you, how did this artist hold his art or her art up to the world, and what did we see from it? And in the meantime, what did they see in the world that made them do their art? Van Gogh was painting because of all the beautiful nature he saw around him. He was a tortured soul, but he painted profoundly beautiful paintings because he sought beauty and solace in nature, because humans didn't give him a good shake. He never did have a woman who loved him. He had to pay prostitutes for companionship. But you wouldn't know that when you see his paintings, the tortured soul. Are all artists tortured? Certainly not. It might help a little. Somebody like a writer like Philip Roth comes along, who just died last year, one of the great American writers, wrote about everything. He wrote later on, he had a very long career, died when he was 84 or something. And his early books, Portnoy's Complaint, Goodbye Columbus, were made into movies. And then in the 90s, when he was in his 60s, folks, he hit a streak of half a dozen novels that were the best that anybody's wrote anywhere. The Human Stain, I Married a Communist. I can't think of all the titles right off the top of my head. I read them all, loved them all. I dare you to read a book called Sabbath Theater. I read Sabbath Theater. Sometimes when you read a book, and this is where literature is important, sometimes you'll read a book at a time in your life where you need it. It's literally a lifesaver. My father was dying horribly of cancer, and I read Sabbath Theater while he was dying, and I was taking care of him, by the way. And Sabbath Theater is about a guy who's had a nervous breakdown. His longtime lover has killed herself, and he essentially goes insane. And it's this terrifying book because his actions are of an insane man. They're not redeeming. He crosses all borders of what we call normal, polite behavior. And it's devastating. And it hit me hard because during the time I was going through this thing with my dad. So sometimes you hit a book. When I was younger, I read many Jack Kerouac books on the road. You read a Jack Kerouac book, that he wrote in the 50s, and you want to hitchhike across the country and discover America. It makes you want to do that if you read it at a certain time. It catches you at that time. J.D. Salinger's wonderful series of books. Hits you at the right time if you read it at the right time. Which for me was in my early 20s. Catcher in the Rye. Catcher in the Rye is pure punk rock, written in the 50s, about a kid, Holden Caulfield, who cannot adjust to the social norms around him. And he rebelled against them. And he reads something like that. When you're going through something like that, and it really stays with you forever, it's part of who you are. Someone is writing about what you're going through. Someone's holding up a mirror to your life. You don't feel so alone anymore. Others are out there like you. Now, for this newer generation, it would probably be maybe the Harry Potter series, possibly, that perhaps many of you have read. and loved and adored because they hit at the right time in your life. Game of Thrones, same thing. There are fantasy writers like Game of Thrones, the Lord of the Rings, Dune. They hit you at the right time in your life where your imagination really grabs onto it, and it means a lot. Horror novels, I don't read any of those really. I'm not big on horror fiction, but people like Stephen King are multi-millionaire best-selling authors because they hit a note in our human psyche. And what is that note? Why do we like horror so much? When I do my week on films, movies next week, I'll be asking that question. Why horror matters? Why do we like to have the living hell scared out of us? Are we that bored with real life? Or is real life that scary? Anyway, so then we have science fiction from old school science fiction like Stranger in a Strange Land to Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote 2001, Space Odyssey and all that. Maybe you've never heard of those. That's okay. Then there's guys like Philip K. Dick who wrote what they would call science fiction, but it really wasn't. It was set in the future, but it wasn't out in outer space with space guns like Star Wars guys. His books are so subversive. Yes, he dropped a lot of LSD when he was writing. His books, I read 10 of his books, Counterclock World. They're mind-blowing trips into an altered reality, but you recognize it. In a counterclock world, let me give you an example, everything's opposite. People look just like we are. We go to work, but instead of being born and growing up, we first die. And we come out of the grave as an old person. And we age backwards. Think about that. Think about that as instead of getting older, you get younger, you become stronger, but you've got all the wisdom because you've already been old. But the tragedy is you're going to keep getting younger. And all of a sudden, you're 30, you're 20, you're 10. But your brain is still, you've been old. You've been 80 already. But now your body is 10 years old. And then you're a toddler. And now you've lost the power of speech. But you've been alive for 80 years. And you're eventually going to go back into the womb. Movies into books. One of them would be Blade Runner. Maybe you've seen that. Biography. Here's a good example of an artist biography. One of my favorite artists, his name's Willem de Kooning. We cannot cover him. I'd love to. He created his modern abstract expressionism, changed the way we look at modern art. Born in the early 20th century, lived until about 1990. And his paintings from the 40s and 50s changed how we look at art. Jackson Pollock's another one. That's one of the best books I've read. Whoever wrote that, Mark Stevens. It's a really highly researched biography. Now, when you do a biography, that means you're writing about somebody else's life. If Willem de Kooning had written that, it would be called an autobiography, meaning he was the author, but he didn't. And then there's another subgenre, which is very, very popular now, called memoir. And that is a little different. That's the memories. So they're flawed, folks. I've written a couple memoirs. I write these solo shows for plays. I've written 2 of those based on my memory of certain events in my life. Someone else who lived through that might have a different memory. But I'm not writing something that was filmed on my iPhone and so it's perfect. I'm remembering it. And we always have flaws in our memory. We engage our memories way different than the facts of life. Think about it, folks. How often you go on a trip or you get drunk or you have something event in your life and you keep telling a story to your friends and it kind of alters each time you tell it because you get better at telling it and maybe you make it more entertaining, it's more funny, more scary, more dangerous. That's memoir. And it's really become very popular now because people want to read about people's lives that way. And then fiction. Fiction is the holy truth, but it's a made up story. Then we have young adult fiction. Have you read some of those? There's been some great ones. Holes. You ever read Holes or Tex? There's dozens of them out there. They made quite a few of those in the movie. Rumblefish is a young adult fiction aimed at people under 21 to say, let's say 15. So they're not children's books. They're a little rougher than that. Holes is not a children's book. I taught children's literature and maybe seen the movie. Guys living in an orphanage, forced to dig these holes. As, you know, they're looking for something. They're essentially slave labor. And the orphanage is run by an evil woman. And then there's children's books. Charlotte's Web, maybe you've read it. Maybe you had it read to you as a child. It's heartbreaking. Charlotte is a spider, folks, living in the barn, talking to the pig, talking to the characters that live in the barn with her, and she grows old in the barn. Now, what do you do when you see a spider? Squish it, kill it. Why don't you read Charlotte's Web and maybe you won't do that next time? Maybe you'll let that spider be. They're not harming anything. They're just trying to live their life out. And so it's a sadly poignant, beautiful children's book about loss. Alice in Wonderland. Who's here has read that? Profoundly psychedelic book. I've read that. I've taught that book. I do believe Lewis Carroll was quite possibly obsessed with little girls, and he was taking some kind of hallucinogenic, probably they think peyote, because how do you make up chasing a rabbit down the rabbit hole and going into a world with the Mad Hatter and the Red Queen, and you take one pill to make you small and one pill to make you large? What's all that about? What are the pills he's talking about? And then he wrote a sequel, sort of a sequel to it, called Alice Through the Looking Glass, where Alice goes through your mirror and lives in the mirror world. That's some profound psychedelic stuff. You know, he was probably taking some money and altering things to get that inspiration. How else do you explain a caterpillar who's smoking a hookah? You know what that is? On a big giant toadstool. Where do you think that imagery comes from? That's real imagery, possibly fueled by medication. It's a trip, man. Alice in Wonderland. It's a nightmare. Alice is not happy down there. She's threatened by everybody and everyone because her curiosity got the best of her. In a way, she's a naughty little girl. She has to be punished. And it's a nightmare. Welcome to my nightmare. And this is a children's book, folks. Very advanced children's book. Probably give most kids a nightmare. So there's all this literature out there. Now we have, it's not new, but we live in a comic book world right now. Just look at Hollywood. Every movie they're making is based on a Marvel or DC comic. I grew up with DC. We didn't have too many Marvels when I was young, but I never desired. I had no desire to be Batman. I didn't, or Superman. But now that's a lot of people, young people, they want to be those characters. You want to be X-Men. You want to be Wolverine, or the Incredible Hulk, or the Swamp Thing. And so comics have swept the universe in graphic novels. And I collected them 30 years ago when they first started coming out, Batman, early Batman stuff. I like the artwork, the creativity behind it. They made some pretty good movies from them too, also. Sin City, who saw Sin City here? Frank Miller is a genius writer, and he does all his own drawings. That's based on one of his graphic novels. So the graphic novels is a gigantic industry, and it's reading, folks. I would put it up there with literature. It's not Shakespeare, which is probably a good thing. But if you look at the imagery and the language and the imagination that it takes, this is the best of who we are, folks. Really, a graphic novel is just a movie. Think about it. You're looking at a movie, pictures and dialogue. That's a movie, folks. But it's on a printed page. So I'm not giving up on reading. I hope you don't give up on it, or don't get anybody to tell you you're not a reader, you can't read. I've had students in my class they were boasting that they never read a novel. That's not a boast. I felt sorry for them. I go, well, until you read On the Road, or The Grapes of Wrath, or A Good Man Is Hard to Find, or Beloved, you won't know anything about life. If you're only getting everything you need from YouTube and TikTok, you're going to have a very shallow, limiting experience. And our brains could take a lot more than that. And I'm not putting that stuff down. I watch YouTube all the time. I get it. But I believe in the written word. And I want to set a fire under you guys to maybe get you to believe in it also. And not to be terrified of it. And not to get bored with it or get lazy. Read one page, put it down. You don't have to read 5 or 10. You'll fall asleep probably. And who knows? Then you'll find yourself reading 2 pages. And then before you know it, you're reading 10 and wanting more. You put that one down after you're finished, and you feel proud and accomplished, and you learn something about the human condition that you never thought about. Because we can't come up with all these ideas on our own, you know. That's what artists are for. They're helping us. And you pick up the next book, and you're off and running. And then you'll say to yourself, I've got a story to tell. One sentence at a time. and you're off and running. Literature matters. Reading matters. Writing matters. Don't take my word for it. Look around. See you next week. Look for the final assignment.